one now, one is scheduled for 7 o'clock and one scheduled for 10:30 this evening. Also welcome those that is linked via our very special YouTube channel, and we are streaming at the same time. And so, Michael Hendrickse, Provincial Electoral Officer for the Electoral Commission in South Africa in the Western Cape, is going to address. It is particularly going to be a review of this morning. So we will have a Q&A session, a very, very short Q&A session afterwards, so please do have your questions ready if you do so. Thank you, Michael.
Good morning. Welcome to our Provincial Operations Center. The status, as I'd like to indicate for the province of the Western Cape, is that all our stations are open and operational. One or two didn't open on time. There have been some challenges also that I need to indicate, especially around the temporary structures that we've had to set up. In the province, we set up 35 temporary structures as voting stations, either because there was no permanent dwelling available, or the permanent structures that were there were already booked out, given the fact that it was this whole period started over a weekend. So we have a number of temporary structures. Out of our 1,577, 35 are temporary. The majority of those temporary structures are in the Cape Town metro. The one impact that we have now experienced, as you could notice, anybody who's been outside, is the weather, and the rain is affecting our, especially our operations at our tents. We have had incidents where we needed to call out our suppliers in 2 cases to come and reinforce our tent structures. We have identified tents specifically in Site B in Khayelitsha, in Maracana, in Philippi East, and also then in Makassar, which is also in Khayelitsha specifically, and paying attention to that together with the assistance of the disaster management unit of the city of Cape Town, and also then with our suppliers in that particular regard. We want to assure voters that the IEC will do everything in its power to allow them to cast their ballot papers during the course of the day. Voting will continue until 9 o'clock. We also have to remind those that the voting will stop at 9 o'clock, but persons who are in the queue as at 9 o'clock will, however, still be allowed to vote. There have also been a number of incidences where, for example, we had a situation where in Ward 114, where the incorrect ward ballot was delivered at Ward 114. In other words, you received a Ward 109 ballot, a ward ballot. But we discovered that problem very early on. Only 6 persons had voted at that stage when we identified that particular problem. And those votes were immediately quarantined and put to one side. The correct ballots are at that station, and voting is continuing in that particular regard. Overall, outside of the metro, the voting is also proceeding well. People are turning up. And as I indicated, we encourage South Africans in the province to come out and cast their vote. We are watching the weather. There is also close working relationship between us and our security cluster on any particular issues that may arise. We are also having a dedicated team of conflict management panelists that are deployed across the province. So in the event of a particular protest that is happening, we would engage with the representatives of those protests, so that, while the IEC cannot respond specifically to their issue, whether it be electricity or housing, etc., but our panelists will be there to allow them to, that the voting is not impeded by their actions. So that particular process is happening also across the province. As I stated also that all stations are open and operating, and where particular matters do arise, we will respond to that. We have also just finished a Provincial Party Liaison Committee meeting where a number of incidences were reported to us, where, for example, typically, I'll give you one example, presiding officers will insist that when party agents arrive that they have the proper accreditation, which a party presiding officer would insist that you must have the logo of your party on your authorized letter, which is not necessarily so. So those small little issues that are causing some delays, and we are dealing with that as well. We've also asked the political parties amongst themselves to ensure that they also keep to the rules around a voting station, especially in terms of tables and tents which are outside of the voting station. Political parties are allowed to have those tables and tents, but those tables and tents mustn't be such that they impede the free access of a voter to the station. At no way should you be waylaying voters who are coming to the station. If a voter on his or own free will wants to come to your party tent, that's fine. But we ask political parties not to redirect voters coming to the station to their particular, to their temporary structure, which is outside of the voting station. That is what I have at the moment, and I will take 10 questions.
Morning, Mr. Hendrickson, Lindsay Denting at ENCA. I just want to clarify the point, the point that you made about the 6 ballots that were cast on incorrect ballot papers. You mentioned that they set aside, but what happened after that? Are those voters called back to recast ballots? And then I just wanted to clarify power outages. We understand in some areas of the city. What impact has that had on voting stations opening on time? Thanks.
Do I respond right away?
Anybody else? Take a question. Barbara from the SABC.
It's Adrian of the SABC. The feedback I've got from some of the voting stations, people are concerned that their temperatures are not being recorded as they enter the stations. I know some of them are being, I've seen, but in others they are not. So I just want to know what's happening over there, please.
We'll take those 2 questions. Papa will come to you on the next person.
Thank you. We do not take temperatures. What we do is we insist that voters, as they arrive at the station, must continue to wear their mask at all times. At the entrance, their hands will be sanitized. The staff will have also the appropriate PPE. The pen that is used, and yes, there is a pen, there are pens at our stations. As the voter uses it, we do sanitize that particular pen as well. With regard to the issue of electricity outages, we had 2 reports of electricity outages. In the one case, it's in Ward 88, that's at the Lutheran Church, where there was no electricity, and we have been engaging with Eskom and the city with regard to determine exactly what is the cause of that outage of electricity at that particular station. And then we have in Ward 39 at the Methodist Church in Ward 39, there was cable theft. That affects not only our voting station, but the particular area. And again, we are in liaison with the City of Cape Town and with Eskom. Yes, there is a pen, there are pens at our stations. I can also just add, in terms of electricity, all our temporary stations do have generators, but we are working with the city to ensure that we have additional standby capacity if and when that is also required.
Thank you. Pippa from Cape Talk. Just a question around special voting. Can you give us any feedback on how things ran on special votes? Particularly, we've had our editor-in-chief wasn't able to cast her special vote because the station closed before 5 yesterday, and then I've just seen a notice on my ward's group that a lot of elderly people have been bussed in this morning because they weren't able to cast their special votes yesterday. Can we have some feedback on that process, please? Thank you.
Oh yeah, oh, sorry, yes. So with the special votes, that proceeded across the province. It went very well. What we did find is that in cases where our staff arrived at the home, the person wasn't home, and which meant that we had to move on. We could not go back again for that. We also know that in some cases the voting stations would close early, but that they would only be allowed to close early because you have a list of people that can come and vote on a special vote day. And if that did happen, it was wrong if they closed the station before the time. But that person is allowed then and we'd urge those voters who couldn't get a special vote to come to the station today to vote as well. With regard to the 6 ballots, what we do is they are quarantined, they are kept separate, and then we await the decision of the Commission. All these matters are reported to the Commission in Pretoria, and they have to make a call on what would happen. The incidences where the wrong ballot is sort of used in a station is not limited only into that one case. It may happen across the country. So the Commission will make a call on that and the circumstances under which those quarantine ballots will either be counted or they're not counted. But for now, they are kept separate. We do not call voters to come back because in many cases you simply don't know whose those particular voters are, given the particular circumstances. So they are quarantined, and we await the Commission decision on those.
And the Seaway Sunday Times?
Good morning, it's Andy Seaway from the Sunday Times. Can you just give clarity on whether all voting stations opened at 7 on the dot this morning? If not, how many did not open at 7? You also mentioned challenges with temporary structures. What challenges are you talking about? I mean, I know you had to call reinforcement with tents. What was happening in the meantime before you called for that reinforcement? Thank you.
And the only question, that will be the last question. Thank you.
Yes, the majority of stations opened on time. We had a situation in the metro, because remember the two things that happen also is that presiding officers are required to report immediately the station opens. Now some of them didn't do that even though the station opened, but we had within the metro 19 stations that didn't open on time. So out of the 1,577 we had, we know of the 19 in the metro that didn't open at 7 o'clock, exactly at 7 o'clock. And when it comes to the challenges, I'm talking specifically around with the weather and the fact that we need to make sure that where we've placed the tent, for example, that if it becomes into a floodplain or whatever, you know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about challenges. If you look at the rain, it's coming, is it at a risk? And that is what we do. We also need to make sure that we reinforce the anchoring of these particular stations. And then lastly, what we also then did, and we got that yesterday, is we then added pagodas to these temporary stations. In other words, extra coverings to assist and minimize the discomfort of voters that have to use those temporary stations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes the 11 a.m. briefing. We will have the second briefing as scheduled for 7 p.m. And also that's subject to change as well. And just a couple of things. Media as well as political parties, if you do have queries, there's a desk that's outside the door to your left-hand side as well.